So obviously on the 31st of December, we had the end of the transition period. And that means that those UK nationals who were settled in Italy by the 31st of December last year are protected by the withdrawal agreement. That was the agreement agreed between the UK and the EU many months ago. The transition period was part of that. That came to an end, as I say, at the end of last year. And under the withdrawal agreement, UK nationals who were lawfully living in Italy by the end of last year enjoy lifelong rights under that withdrawal agreement for as long as you remain living in Italy. And I'm sure the questions this evening will raise lots of questions about what those rights are under the withdrawal agreement. Our session this evening is very much focused on that agreement and UK nationals who are covered by that agreement. Obviously, we also have another agreement, which is the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. That was agreed at the end of last year between the UK and the EU. There are some really important citizens' rights provisions in that agreement as well, which provide for rights for UK nationals in the EU or EU nationals in the UK. But that's about people who are coming to the EU or to the UK after the end of the transition period. So I just wanted to sort of highlight and underline that tonight we're talking about the withdrawal agreement, that agreement that protects the rights of UK nationals who are lawfully living in Italy by the end of last year. It gets, of course, a little bit complicated in the sense that those people also enjoy some family reunification rights, which means you may have family members coming to Italy to join you. And if they fall under the withdrawal agreement, they will also enjoy rights under the withdrawal agreement. I hope that was helpful. Shall we take some questions?
So I don't have any questions through just yet. I'm sure they'll be here any minute. But do you want to maybe say something about maybe the biometric card, Jerry, while we're waiting?
Yeah, sure. No, I can keep going. I will. I can keep going. So if you are protected by the withdrawal agreement, as I say, you need to have been lawfully living in Italy by the end of last year, by the 31st of December. What does lawfully living in Italy mean? The easiest answer is that you were officially resident. So you were registered with your town hall. So you might have a EU residency document like an attestato di soggiorno, a certificato di residenza, or you might be a permanent resident and have an attestazione di soggiorno permanente. So you were registered with the town hall. And so you are in scope of the withdrawal agreement. However, you can also be considered lawfully living in Italy if you didn't yet register by the end of the year. You didn't have time, you arrived late in Italy, late in the year in Italy, you didn't have time to register with the town hall. You may well still be in scope of the withdrawal agreement if you can provide evidence of being settled in Italy. And that briefly means having a work contract, being self-employed, being enrolled as a student, or being a retiree here with financial resources, some form of health cover. So if you can evidence that, despite not being officially registered, you may still well be in scope of the withdrawal agreement. So I think it's really important to underline, how do you know if you're in scope of the withdrawal agreement? And that means if you are in scope of the withdrawal agreement, you have the right to request a new biometric residency card. Biometric, that means you give fingerprints, it's high security, and that is available from your local questura. So I'm sure we'll get lots of questions about the new card because it was released on the 1st of January this year. We already know lots of UK nationals have requested it, and we're very happy to take questions on this new biometric card.
Fabulous. We do have some questions. So first of all, about the process of getting the card. We understand they need to go to the Questura. Can they go anywhere else?
Shall I take that? So the biometric card will be issued by the Questura, so it wouldn't be issued anywhere else, and it wouldn't be issued by the Comune because the Questura has been chosen as the relevant authority to issue this card. On the page that is also found in the Living in Italy, there is then a list of Questura, so a person would need to see which one is their local Questura, because obviously is less local than your Comune would be. So sometimes it does entail traveling a bit further away and is Once you found your questura, you need to send them an email. They have a dedicated email address for UK national requesting this card, and then they will advise you where you need to go, because they might have different offices and they might have dedicated an office specifically for this card. So you would need to email, get an appointment, and get the address where you need to go for the appointments and give your fingerprints at the questura though.
And just moving on from that, Greta, we're getting a lot of questions about people whose questura don't seem to know anything about the card. Could that be because they're going to a more local questura, whereas they need to be going to the central one?
It's obviously very new. It's still very new. Most of the questura have updated their website and contain a specific page on the new card with a dedicated email. There are some questura that still don't have that information. IOM, we are monitoring the implementation in the various questura, and just yesterday we emailed all the questura that didn't have any information yet, asking when they will have information ready. So our suggestion is that until the questura has information on the page, not to try to book an appointment, because it probably means they're not ready to issue the card. And because not using the dedicated emails means using the general email might be more difficult to get a reply. The appointment might be longer away. So it's best to just monitor the questura website. Once there is a dedicated email, to email them. Until then, might have to bear with us. We'll try to find the information on all those questura as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thanks, Greta. And then we have a question from Helen Harrison Jefferson, who asks, can you confirm that you can still get the 18.4 withdrawal agreement attestazione after 31st of December, as my comune keeps refusing it?
Yes, our understanding is that they can keep issuing this document to UK nationals that were registered by the 31st of December. I think there might be some confusions around what documents they can and cannot issue at this stage. If the comune has refused to issue, maybe I would suggest that they get in touch with us at IOM so that we can try and have a conversation with the comune to clarify the situation and try to get the attestazione issued.
Great.
Shall we say, Caroline, shall we just say a few words about the sort of relationship between the attestazione and the biometric card? Because we've done so many of these sessions where we've said, you know, there's this new attestazione, the 18.4 attestazione di iscrizione anagrafica. It was a new document issued by the Town Hall. It was first released around February last year. And at that point, it was the only document you could get that was evidence of your status under the withdrawal agreement, because it actually referred to the withdrawal agreement. Now we've got the new biometric card, which for those in scope also refers to the withdrawal agreement. It is valid for 5 years for temporary residents, 10 years for permanent residents. That's the card that's valid, not your rights, I would underline. So we are getting asked, you know, do I still need the attestazione? Because now we've got the new biometric card. I mean, the Italian government's been very clear in its Vademecum, which you can find on our Living In Guide, that one of the simplest ways to get the biometric card would be to show the questore your attestazione, your 18.4 attestazione. However, it isn't the only way you can show that you have a right to get the biometric card. So it's not mandatory. Really want to underline that point. The attestazione 18.4 is not mandatory. Town Hall should still be issuing it if you want it. But as Greta says, you can also do a self-declaration at the questura where you confirm that you are a registered resident in Italy. You should be able to take your other residency documents, you know, your EU residency document, or even other evidence of being settled in Italy. I mean, clearly showing the attestazione would be the simplest thing to do at the questura, but I just want to underline it's not a mandatory requirement to get the biometric card.
Perfect. And still on biometric cards, we have a question from Andre Alexander, who asks whether you need a biometric card if you're a dual national. I presume that would mean Italian, British dual national.
I guess the answer would be depending on what the dual nationality is. If one of the two is Italian, then he wouldn't need a biometric card. He wouldn't be able to get a biometric card because obviously he would be in Italy as an Italian national. If the dual nationality is other two nationalities, which could be, you know, a UK national and another European national, then it would depend on what is the nationality registered with the Comune. If you're registered as a UK national, then you can get the biometric card. If you're registered under another nationality, then you wouldn't need, or you probably would have difficulties getting the biometric card.
And I would just add to that if you're a dual national and you have an EU nationality, let's say you're UK Italian, or you're registered as an Irish national here in Italy, your residency rights flow from your EU nationality. So it's not as though you sort of need the biometric card to evidence your kind of withdrawal agreement status, because you're, as Greta says, you're registered EU nationality, if that's what you've done, and therefore your residency rights in Italy come from that EU nationality. It gets a bit confusing because you're actually covered by the withdrawal agreement potentially as well through your UK nationality, but that's more to do with the UK authorities recognising that status. And our page on gov.uk has recently been updated for dual nationals. So if you have questions about how to access a UK state pension as a dual national, for example, how do you show that you're covered by the withdrawal agreement, do have a look on gov.uk under pensions and benefits for UK nationals living in the EU.
Fabulous. And then moving on to a different subject, we have a couple of questions about driving licenses. So Alex Grace asks, they haven't been able to renew their driving license due to a lack of information at ACI. And they're also worried about giving up their UK licenses as they require it when they're occasionally working in the UK. So perhaps a more general question about conversion.
So from the 1st of January this year, the rules around driving licenses changed after the end of the transition period. So for UK nationals who have been resident in Italy, so registered with their town hall for less than 12 months or less, you can continue to use a UK driving licence. It will be recognised. If you have been registered as a resident for more than 12 months in Italy, you can no longer use a UK driving licence here in Italy. You would need to obtain an Italian one, and you would have to resit your test to obtain an Italian one. If you started the exchange process from the UK licence to the Italian one last year and you just haven't completed it, but you have evidence of starting the process in 2020, you can continue with that exchange process without having to resit your test. We are in negotiations with the Italian government for an agreement on the continued right to exchange your licence. So please do keep checking our Living in Italy page for updates. That agreement would mean that you could continue to exchange your licence for an Italian one without having to resit your test. I would just say a few other things on driving licences. EU licences are recognised in the UK. So, if you're concerned about, but what happens when I go back to the UK, you can use an EU licence in the UK. And I would also say that UK driving licences are recognised in Italy for visitors. So if you've got somebody coming to visit you, I know not a lot of people are travelling at the moment, but in due course, if you have someone coming to visit you in Italy, they can use their UK driving licence because they're not a resident here.
Lovely, and that also answers our next question on driving licenses. So our next question is from Lauren Levine on residency status. She is resident in Italy, but has had to go back to the UK to care for a vulnerable relative. Will she lose her residency because the contract on her flat was closed when she went back to the UK? And will it be a problem for her eventually returning to Italy, as she won't be able to return to that same address?
I'll take this up and then maybe Jerry can jump in. So obviously it depends if this person was ordinary resident or permanent resident. As a permanent resident, someone can leave Italy for up to 5 years and they wouldn't be losing their residency rights. As an ordinary resident, you are supposed to spend at least 6 months in every 12 months period in Italy to maintain that residency. So depending on that is part of the answer. And I think one thing is to actually maybe be cancelled by the registry office because you moved and someone else moved into that flat. And one thing is your residency rights, which you'll need to be able to prove when you come back. But the fact that you've been cancelled by that registry doesn't mean that you lose your residency rights necessarily, as for a permanent resident, for example. I don't know if Jerry wants to add more.
No, that's perfect. It's as you say, there's quite a significant difference between what we call ordinary residents, those who haven't lived in Italy for 5 years, and permanent residents, as you've said, Greta. There's quite a big difference in terms of valid absences without losing your residency status.
Fabulous. And then moving on to a question from Bex Frankenberg. This is about registering residency after the 31st of December. So she had a registered rental contract before the end of the year and has only now submitted, though, her residency request to the Comune. This is Milan. And is that all right, even though it was submitted after EU exit?
So if you submitted the request to the Comune after the 31st of December, the Comune might not be able to deal with your application because if the application had been submitted before the 31st of December but not completed, they can still work on those applications. But for the ones submitted after 31st of December, the Comune will not be the responsible authority to deal with them. So the person would need to contact the Questura to request a biometric card if they wanted the biometric card to show their evidence of their rights to be in Italy. As Jerry was saying earlier, there's various ways of getting a biometric card from the Questura. And for those that don't have any certificates because they were not registered and cannot self-certify because you would be self-certifying that you are registered as a resident, then you would need to prove directly to the Questura that you were lawfully living in Italy before 31st of December. So the same sort of evidence that you would have brought to the Comune would now need to be brought directly to the Questura.
And I would just add that the Vada Mecum, which the Italian government published at the end of last year, which you can find in English on our Living In guide, does refer to those who have never registered in Italy, but can prove that they should be covered by the withdrawal agreement. There is a specific paragraph for that group of people, and it's exactly as Greta has outlined.
And John Varnum, I think that answers your question as well on withdrawal agreement rights and starting the process after the end of 2020. And then we have another question on retaining residency from Fiona Attrell, who wants to know whether there will be any leniency towards retaining residency for those who've had to spend more time than the maximum limit outside of Italy because of the pandemic. Does the crisis count as extreme circumstances?
I mean, that's a really, really fair question. It's something we're certainly monitoring. I mean, as it stands, it's as Greta has outlined, that there is a requirement under EU law to spend at least 6 months in every 12-month period in Italy to maintain your residency rights, unless you're a permanent resident. And that means you can be absent for up to 5 years if you're a permanent resident protected by the withdrawal agreement. But obviously, these are challenging times. People have spent time outside of Italy, perhaps longer than they were planning. So it is definitely something that we're monitoring. I would say, and perhaps it's now worth saying also, that Italy has always been clear that if you are a registered resident here in Italy, that you can return to Italy despite the restrictions on travel. That is one of the groups of people that can come back to Italy. That's not to say it's always easy, and you may have very good reasons for sort of remaining outside of Italy for the time being. But just to underline that if you are a resident in Italy, you have a right to come back to your place of residence.
Great. And then we have a question on being asked for a permesso di soggiorno when we know that is not necessary for UK nationals. So somebody who's been living legally in Italy for 3 years, is a resident, has the attestazione and wants to start a business, but it's actually the notaio that's asking for a permesso di soggiorno before going ahead. What can she signpost him to reassure him that permesso di soggiorno is not needed?
So the embassy is very much focused on this issue because we are aware that some UK nationals have been asked to provide, let's call it a third country national residency permit, a permesso di soggiorno. even though they are covered by the withdrawal agreement. So we are aware this has been an issue for some people trying to access benefits, some people trying to access healthcare, perhaps around work contracts, and this obviously is another example. So we are very focused on this. I just want to underline clearly, if you are covered by the withdrawal agreement, because you've been a resident in Italy, you were a resident before the 31st of December, your key bit of evidence is the new biometric card, which specifies the withdrawal agreement. But you can also evidence your status, as we've already said, through the 18.4 attestazione, your current EU residency document. So the requirement to hold a permesso di soggiorno for those covered by the withdrawal agreement is wrong, is incorrect. So we really want to be made aware of when these issues arise. So I'm grateful to this person for flagging this issue. By all means, get in touch with us. Our contact details are on our Living in Italy page. And as I say, we're very focused on this. We are speaking to the relevant ministries about this. And we're really encouraging for more communication to be made, which clearly states that any requirement to have a permesso di soggiorno for a UK national that's covered by the withdrawal agreement is not correct. And to be very clear how UK nationals can evidence your status under the withdrawal agreement. So we are encouraging more communication of that nature from the key ministries. I would underline, of course, if you're not covered by the withdrawal agreement, you are a UK national moving to Italy at some point as a third country national, then the permesso di soggiorno would be the valid document for you if you were settling in Italy, but it is certainly not the valid document for those covered by the withdrawal agreement.
Thanks, Jerry. And if we could take a step back, I think we need to just go over again for people who didn't manage to get their residency registered by the end of last year. What sort of documents can they produce to register their residency, and where do they need to go? This is a question from Sarah Bradley.
Okay, so someone settled in Italy before 31st of December. They were lawfully living in Italy, but they did not register with the Comune before 31st of December. They would need to contact their local questura in the dedicated email for UK nationals trying to obtain the new biometric card. They would need to contact the questura, let them know that they were lawfully living in Italy before 31st of December. They would like an appointment, and what documents do they need to bring. Then the questura should be able to advise if someone wasn't registered, so cannot produce a certificate of residency, on what documents they would need to bring with them at their appointment. The range would vary on the circumstances of the person, from enrollment letter of the university, a work contract, a registered lease, and the questura would be the authority to advise you on what documents they would like you to produce. I hope that helps.
Great. We are getting quite a few questions on this subject, so I think it's always good to go over it a couple of times. And then on a completely different subject, we have a question from Lucy Fisher on children accessing higher education in the UK. So for somebody who is covered by the withdrawal agreement in Italy, some university sites say that you must be resident in the UK to qualify for UK fees, not that you have to have British nationality, which it says on different sites. Can we say which of these is true?
So in terms of studying higher education back in the UK, it depends whether your child is an EU national or a UK national. If they are a UK national, which I'm assuming from this question, then there is a 7-year window from the start of this year to be able to apply for the home fee status and the appropriate student finance support. So that's a 7-year window from the 1st of January 2021 to be able to apply for the home fee status. Now, it is worth looking into what requirements you need to fulfill to be eligible for that home fee status. It's not just an automatic eligibility because you're a UK national. There are some residency requirements in the UK to be eligible for that home fee status. But what's clear is that we have that 7-year window for UK nationals who are currently living in the EU to be eligible to apply for home fee status. And that also includes, if your child was never, wasn't born in the UK, they were born in the EU and have never lived in the UK. But as I say, it's definitely worth checking the requirements around residency to be eligible for that home fee status.
Lovely. And then we have a question on stamped passports. So somebody covered by the withdrawal agreement who had his passport stamped at the border when returning to Italy in early January. Is this going to be the norm from now on?
So under the withdrawal agreement, if you are covered by the withdrawal agreement, you have what's called facilitated entry and exit rights. So when you are coming back to Italy, when you are returning to Italy as your place of residence, under the Schengen Border Code, which has recently been updated, as you might imagine, your passport should not be stamped when you enter Italy, nor should you be questioned at the border, as other third country nationals are for your reason for travel. The stamping process, let's be clear, is so that the clock starts ticking for those who are limited to staying in Italy in that 90 and 180 day period. But under the withdrawal agreement, you shouldn't have your passport stamped. So I'm sorry to hear that someone has had their passport stamped in error. Please do get in touch with us if that's happened. We really would like to be aware of any of these cases. We've already been engaging with the Italian government to ensure that there is a smooth entry and exit at the border for all UK nationals, including those in scope. I would also underline that if your passport has been stamped in error, it has no impact whatsoever on your rights in Italy. It has no impact on your rights under the withdrawal agreement, on your residency rights, and it is simply negated by the fact that you can evidence you're a resident in Italy. So if you've got a residency document, that piece of paper or the attestazione or the biometric card, that simply negates the impact of that stamp on the passport. I recognise that may not, it's still probably quite alarming to have your passport stamped. You're probably a bit anxious about it, but your residency status just negates that stamp. And certainly next time you travel, carry your residency documentation with you. And as I say, that will negate the impact of the stamp.
Thanks, Jerry. And now we have a question from Jane Agnino on driving licenses and IDPs. So we have UK driving licenses, we have permanent residency in Italy, but we're back and forth between the UK and Italy. Can we keep our UK driving licenses and carry an IDP?
So if you are resident in Italy, officially resident in Italy, you wouldn't be using an IDP from the UK. An IDP would be used from the UK for visitors if required, but they're not required in Italy either for visitors. So if you are resident in Italy, as I've already said, and you've been resident in Italy for more than 12 months, a UK driving licence is no longer valid. You can no longer use a UK driving licence. You know, they do have a right to check if you hold residency status. If you do, you are no longer able to use a UK driving licence, and you should obtain an Italian one, and you will need to reset your test to obtain an Italian one. As I say, we're engaging with the Italian government on a future agreement on continued exchange rights, which would mean you would be able to exchange your licence without taking the test. But currently, you need to obtain an Italian licence, and you would have to reset your test to do so.
Right, I have quite a long question here, which I'm just trying to work out. So it's a question from Tony Deegan, so he's British citizen, his wife and his daughter are dual British-Italian nationality. They are all officially resident in Italy, and they have Italian EHICs, and I believe he would like to know whether he can use that to access NHS treatment in the UK.
Okay.
Question
yes,
for Vito.
Yes, to me, healthcare at last. Actually, it's good because it means people don't have so many problems on healthcare. So on EHICs, yes, I can confirm that Italian EHICs are recognized in the UK. So anyone who lives in Italy and has a valid Italian EHIC, which is called TEAM in Italian, can use it when visiting the UK temporarily. So this was also a provision under the withdrawal agreement. So under the withdrawal agreement, anyone who was covered could continue to use the EHIC in the UK, including family members. Obviously, with the trade and cooperation agreement, the process it's a bit easier because all Italian EECs will remain valid. So even for those who are not covered under the withdrawal agreement, so it's much easier to give an answer because the answer is yes, you can continue to use it. This is because Italy is competent for your healthcare, so any cost will be reimbursed to the UK by Italy when you present the card.
Great, thanks, Vita. And then we have a question from Philip George, who would like to know what the distinction is between a 5-year and a 10-year biometric card.
So they distinguish the validity of the card, not of the rights. But if you're a permanent resident, so if you already lived in Italy for 5 years and you have permanent residency, then you should be given a 10 years old, a card valid for 10 years. If you're an ordinary resident, so if you lived in Italy if you're in Italy for the first 5 years now, then you would be getting a biometric card that is valid for 5 years. As Jerry said, that's not your rights, it's just the card validity that is 5 years. So in order to get the 10 years card, you would need to prove that you're a permanent resident at this stage in Italy, so that you lived in Italy for over 5 years.
Thanks, Greta. Lovely. And then we have, again, on a completely different subject, Lucy Fisher would like to know whether we've lost our right to vote in local elections.
So if you don't hold Italian nationality, if you are a UK national living in Italy, you no longer have the right to vote in local elections or European elections here in Italy. And actually that changed on the day we left the EU rather than on the 1st of January this year. It was one of the things that changed immediately. The UK left the EU rather than at the end of the transition period.
Thank you. And then we have another healthcare question for Vittoria. This is a question from Chris Ogilvie. They have been resident in Italy since 2019. They have their residency. So they're not pensioners, but they have private income from the UK and they don't work. And he would like to know how to access healthcare now after EU exit. Does he register with the UK? And how does he claim back Italian healthcare costs from the UK? Sorry, that's a bit confusing.
No, okay, I think I understood. So in order to be able to register for healthcare in Italy, so to use Italian state healthcare, you need to be eligible. So you need to meet some requirements. So even if you're resident, that doesn't give you an automatic entitlement to register for healthcare with your ASL, local health authorities, because it's either you can do that if you pay social security contributions via your employment in Italy, or if you have a UK pension, for example, and you can then at that point get a UK S1 and register it in Italy. Under your circumstances, if you don't work and you haven't reached pension age, so you don't get a UK pension yet, the only way to access state-funded healthcare is through voluntary contributions, iscrizione volontaria. So you will need to contact your local health authority. They will tell you what you need to present. So normally is your income from previous year that you need to present. They might accept the self-declaration. And then you have to, they give you an amount that you will have to pay at the post office. After you paid, then you can register with your ASL. You also need to bring evidence that you're resident in Italy. So in this case, if you're a resident in Italy, the UK will not be responsible for your healthcare. So you cannot claim from the UK, because the UK can only be competent for your healthcare till you're resident in the UK. Access to NHS is residence-based. So if you moved your residency to Italy, you cannot claim from the UK. You will be able to once you start drawing a UK state pension, if you have if you will get one. At that point, you will be able to apply for a UK S1, and you will be able to register a UK S1 in Italy. And then at that point, the UK will become competent for your healthcare. Till then, it's either voluntary contributions or private health insurance, which will not give you an entitlement to register with a GP, for example. I just wanted to also confirm that if you register for voluntary healthcare, you are not entitled to an Italian EIC, to a term. So every time you travel across the EU or you return to the UK, you will need to, our advice is to buy private insurance, because otherwise you will be charged in case you need emergency care or any necessary treatment while you are abroad.
Thanks, Victoria. And we have another health question. So it is somebody covered by the withdrawal agreement, but has private insurance. But she's wondering whether she can register with the ASLA in order to get the COVID jab. Do we know anything about that?
So we don't have specific information about that, and I think we're going to make some inquiries actually, because this is something that applies to a number of people who are not registered, who are resident but are not registered with the ASL. So everyone who has, for example, this private insurance will not be registered with us. So at the moment, I know that as a general principle, Italy would want to guarantee this sort of preventive treatment like the vaccination. We don't have the details of how that will work. As you know, the vaccination program is still being defined, and it's not even clear how it will work for people registered with us. So I think once we have any information, we will publish that on our public pages, Facebook or Living in Guides, depending on the type of information we get. So I can just say, keep following us, and we will follow this up for sure. I don't know if, Jerry, do you agree with this? Is that all right? Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then we have a question from Luke Casanel, who obtained the attestazione last year. He doesn't have the biometric card because he's since returned to the UK, and he'd like to know whether he retains any rights to live in Italy in the future. I think we may have covered this right at the beginning.
I mean, obviously the attestazione is evidence of being registered as a resident and of being covered by the withdrawal agreement. In terms of returning in Italy, it depends if the person is a permanent resident or ordinary resident, how long the person is planning to be outside of Italy. Yeah, because of those 6 months and 12 months period for ordinary resident, while a permanent resident can stay outside of Italy for up to 5 years without losing those residency rights.
Thank you. Thanks, Greta. And then we have a question from James McDonald. He's a dual Australian-UK citizen, though he doesn't actually specify under which citizenship he's registered in Italy. But he does say that because he lives in Umbria, he isn't able to make the voluntary healthcare payment. And he wants to know whether that has changed since EU exit.
So we are aware that Umbria is a special case, and we are engaging to get clarity from the regional health authorities about how things will work for UK nationals. So once we have news again, we will update our channels. What I can say now is that third country nationals in Umbria can apply for voluntary registration. They could always apply. So depending on which nationality you're registered under, if you're registered under Australian nationality, you would be able to register. Even though, thinking about it, if you say you couldn't register before, it might mean that you were registered as a UK national. So as things are now, we believe that you might be able to register, but if you could wait a couple of weeks, we might be able to give an update on the situation in Umbria.
Great. And then This is an interesting question from Fabio Fantazzini, who moved to a new house with their British partner, who has been resident in Italy since 2016, so covered by the withdrawal agreement. But their Polizia Municipale from the new comune has asked him, as an Italian, to complete the Comunicazione di Ospitalità in favore di cittadino extracomunitario to declare that he lives with a non-EU citizen. And she insists that now the British citizens are extracomunitari, he needs to complete that document for his partner who is resident in Italy. What should he do? That's a lot of blank faces.
Greta and I were waiting to answer that one. I'm going to be perfectly honest, that's the first time I've heard of that. I think it's really good that that's been raised, because that, I mean, I think, what I would say in broad terms is that UK nationals who are protected by the withdrawal agreement are still third country nationals in Italy, now that the UK has left the EU, but you hold a special status. And part of that status is that you, sort of for official purposes, you should be considered in the same way as Italian nationals in terms of sort of bureaucracy and access to services, etc. So there is a sort of non-discrimination clause. I don't know whether that would be relevant for this question, but it does sound like something we ought to look into.
I would add that this document is requested for people who are hosting non-EU nationals in their home. So, yeah. But that's clearly not the case here. Okay.
Greta, I don't know if you want to add any more. I mean, you do have to make it. Often the person who is hosting someone has to make that declaration in terms of to register as a resident or when changing residency.
Yeah, and it's just a declaration that you're hosting someone, and it's more linked to security than anything else. To be honest, I don't know the answer to that, but we can definitely look into it, and hopefully we'll be in the readout if we can get information, or later on we'll try and figure it out.
Yeah.
Great. Sorry. Okay, so a question from Mohini Dat, who asks whether if they've been given a residency certificate that doesn't reference 18.4 of the withdrawal agreement, he just wants clarity that they no longer need to go back to the comune and insist on getting that, because they'll be applying for the biometric card anyway. So it's whether the 18.4 attestazione is still mandatory, or still need this, whether they still need that.
The withdrawal agreement attestazione is not mandatory. From the vademecum is one of the options in order to obtain the biometric card. So there is various ways to get the biometric card, and the attestazione is one of them. And obviously, because it refers to the withdrawal agreement, it's kind of the easiest one to show that you clearly fit into that category, but it's not the only one. And on the vademecum that you can find on the Living in Italy page, you can find a list of what else can be asked at the Questura. So obviously is the choice of the person, what they want to do and how they want to proceed. But there is a way to get the biometric card that doesn't entail the withdrawal agreement attestazione.
And Greta, Karen Knight would like to know whether the services of IOM will be extended beyond the initial deadline.
I'm afraid it's not a question for me. I hope we will, but I'm afraid I'm not able to answer that at this stage.
So at the moment, how long do we have you for, Greta?
At the moment, it's 31st of March. Yeah, end of March.
And then just a further clarification for Heather Walker. We were talking earlier about the difference between the 5-year and the 10-year biometric cards. She just wants clarification on whether at the end of those 5 or 10 years, it means going back to the Questura to renew the card. So we're looking down the line.
Yeah, so depending on the validity, 5 years or 10 years, but the Questura should remain the relevant authority to obtain a renewed card. Yeah.
And I should just to add on the sort of format of the card, because we often get asked about this. It's a harmonised format across the EU. So the Commission instructed member states to issue this harmonised format of a residency card for those in scope of the withdrawal agreement. So the 5-year and 10-year validity was part of that harmonised format. And I would also underline that it's not just a withdrawal agreement biometric card. This will be the format that all third country nationals will have who get a residency permit from the Questura. But the difference is that it refers to the withdrawal agreement for those who are protected by the withdrawal agreement.
Thank you. And then we have a question here from Suzanne Dodd, who applied for and received, so she got her residency card before the end of the year and paid for a year's medical cover as was required at the time, and she's confused as to what rights she has now. However, she does go on to say that she'd like to resettle here for good with her Italian partner from June, which means leaving her home and job in the UK. So it sounds like she hasn't actually moved here yet and has taken residency before moving here. Can we clarify maybe on having two residencies?
So I would say no. I mean, I'm glad the question's been raised, because we get asked a lot of people who spend a lot of time in the UK and Italy going to and fro. Obviously, not at the moment. People are not travelling very much, but in the past, there are some people who've spent sort of equal time between the UK and Italy. I mean, the simple answer is you can't be officially resident in two places at the same time. If you, to be protected by the withdrawal agreement, you should have been settled in Italy by the end of last year. That means officially registered with the town hall, or to be able to evidence that you were settled in Italy by the 31st of December. And Grace has talked already about how you can do that via a work contract or self-employed or being enrolled as a student, etc. And that would mean that you were registered as a resident in Italy, or you would be recognised as lawfully living in Italy, being protected by the withdrawal agreement, and therefore you'd be able to request the biometric card from the Questura, which specifies the withdrawal agreement. If you aren't able to evidence that you were settled in Italy by the end of the transition period, you're spending lots of time in Italy, but you weren't settled as recognised by the relevant EU law, you were sort of travelling between the UK and Italy, then you wouldn't necessarily be in scope of the withdrawal agreement. You would be considered as having your residency still in the UK. And at that point, if you wanted to settle in Italy in the future, you would do so as a third country national needing to meet Italy's immigration requirements. So there's a difference between being covered by the withdrawal agreement because you were settled in Italy by the end of last year and having lifelong rights to live in Italy as you were doing before, and those who aren't covered by the withdrawal agreement wanting to settle in Italy in the future would be considered as third country nationals needing to meet Italy's domestic immigration system.
Thanks, Jerry. Yes, you clarified that, I think, very well. And then a question on seconded workers. So somebody who's registered resident in Italy and has been working here seconded to an Italian organisation for 3 years under a UK contract which is ongoing. Can they keep working here without obtaining a work visa?
So this might be, and please others jump in, this might be somebody who's been posted here by the sounds of it. So a UK national who's still got their their place of residency is mainly in the UK, but they've been posted temporarily to Italy. Our understanding is that the Italian government would need to recognise you as somebody with who had sort of regulated their status before Italy. So I'm not sure if this person also sort of registered with the town hall before the end of the transition period. If they did register with the town hall before the end of the transition period, even though they were posted in Italy, then they are clearly protected by the withdrawal agreement for as long as they are working in Italy. So there wouldn't be any requirement for a work permit. If they didn't register with the town hall as while working here, then my advice would be to, but they want to remain working in Italy without a permit, enjoy their current rights, then they should go to the Questura to see if they
Sorry, there's a problem with the microphone, with Geraldine's microphone. Greta, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. They're frozen for me, both Jerry and Caroline.
Yeah. Okay. Jerry, you were frozen. So if you could repeat what you were saying.
Sure. So I think we lost the line there briefly, but yeah. I was saying that if you are a posted worker, it means that you have your residency in the UK and you are posted to Italy to work. We are still seeking clarification from the Italian government on the how they recognise those who are posted to Italy. And there is a difference, I think, between those who were working in Italy but didn't register their residency before the end of the year and those who did register a residency status in Italy before the end of the year. So as soon as we have more information, do check our Living in Italy guide for further updates. That's where we will publish information on posted workers. Vito, I don't know if you want to say something around sort of the healthcare rights of posted workers as well.
Yes, so maybe we can add that if you have the right to stay and continue your posting, your work here, you will also keep your right to healthcare cover. So the UK will keep paying for your healthcare as you are employed by the UK. So either through your UK EHIC, depending on your circumstances, or a UK S1. So that will continue as well if you are allowed to stay and continue your posting.
We're all happy to see you back, Caroline.
Hello. Oh, thank you. Yes. What did I miss? I'm so very sorry.
Not at all. We were still answering the previous question, so you could just carry straight on.
Great. Yes, I lost my connection completely there. So what does, a question from Greg Michael, he would like to know, what does somebody with Italian residency need to return to Italy? He hasn't started the procedure yet so he doesn't have the biometric card, and it sounds like he's in the UK and needs to come back into Italy.
So I'm sure Greta would want to say more, but I would say, there's no deadline for getting the biometric card. It is something that if you are covered by the withdrawal agreement, you have a right to request. I would also say that your rights don't depend on holding it. Really want to underline that point, but our advice is that those covered by the withdrawal agreement should seek to obtain it because it's the simplest way of evidencing your status in Italy. But there isn't a deadline for obtaining it, and that it's not mandatory, and that, as we've said before, as Greta so clearly outlined before, you maintain your residency status as long as you haven't been outside of Italy for a certain period of time. So for ordinary residents, that's you haven't been outside of Italy for more than 6 months in a 12-month period. I think it's 183 days in every 365 you need to be in Italy. And if you're a permanent resident in Italy, that you haven't been outside of Italy for more than 5 years. If you have been outside of Italy for more than both those periods in either of those scenarios, then you don't hold your residency status any longer in Italy. That's under EU law, and you wouldn't be able to obtain the withdrawal agreement biometric residency card. Greta, I don't know if you want to say anything else.
I just wanted to jump in case the question was about what to produce at the border if you're coming back to Italy and you still don't have the biometric card yet. In that case, obviously, as a resident, you can come back to Italy, notwithstanding all the COVID restrictions, and you should be able to prove, if you have an attestazione, Italian ID card, you should produce those to prove that you are a resident. You should also be able to self-certify if they give you a self-certification of those. And you can also bring all the other documents you might be able to have in terms of a house lease, a work contract, just to try and show that you're just returning home. You live in Italy, you're returning home, you should be allowed to fly back.
Sorry, I didn't realize.
I'm not sure if my interpretation is correct. I just thought I would include that.
We covered all the bases.
It gave us an opportunity to talk about residents in absence again. And I would just want to flag, sorry, that if you do have issues, you know, coming back to Italy as your place of residence, do get in touch with us.
Lovely. And then we have another question for Vito, from somebody who would like to know whether the S1 issued by the UK Health Authority is still valid in Italy for the purposes of free enrolment with the National Health System.
That's easy. Yes. Yes, it's still valid. So no problem with registering a UK S1 or continuing to access healthcare through a UK S1.
Now, I don't know whether I don't have any more questions. I don't know whether there's anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention.
I'll just say that obviously if someone is still having difficulties with their comune or are having difficulties in getting the Italian ID card from the comune, or they're having difficulties with the biometric, or they just have question, IOM is available and all our contact details remain on the Living in Italy page.
And I would say that thank you for that, Greta. Your support is invaluable. I would say please do keep checking our Living in Italy page. We will shortly be updating it with more detailed information on the biometric card and the process to obtain it. We are aware that some questura are doing different things to others. As Greta's already said, very focused on that, and that we are working with the Ministry of Interior on just clarifying some of those outstanding issues where one UK national has been treated slightly different to another in terms of getting the card. As soon as we have further clarifications, we will be updating our Living In guide with a specific guide on how to get the card. So please do keep checking that Living In guide for further updates.
We do actually have one final question just before we end, and I think we do have time for that. It's very generic, but it's Sue Palmer would like to know, because we haven't got onto other subjects, very specific subjects such as car registration, I think personal effects, that sort of thing. Where can they go for more information?
So definitely our Living in Italy page. Also, I would signpost people to our travel advice. There's a lot of information there already about what you can bring across the border in terms of sort of personal items, but also traveling between the UK and Italy. It's also where we have information on traveling with pets, for example. So if you're thinking about crossing between Italy and the UK and some of the issues around that, you may find the information on travel advice. Otherwise, on our Living in Italy page, there's also a very comprehensive website on gov.uk, which is Living in Europe. So if you Google Living in Europe, there's lots of information up there as well. And I would definitely say sign up to our social media channels as well, and sign up to our mailing list, because that means you would get our regular newsletter from the ambassador. And we always try to include the very latest information in that newsletter as well.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. And thank you to Greta, Vittoria and Jerry for answering all of these sometimes quite complex, I think, questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, please stay there for 1 minute. Just this. Then going back to here.